In week 3, we will go to module 3 from Canvas. In module 3, we will cover chapter 3 in the textbook. We will talk about more about the programming expression, and we have the interaction with the user, how we will get user input and output to the console. We will talk about more about that. So in this chapter agenda, you can see we will talk about more about the seeing object. So then we will talk about how to do the type casting and format the output. So when we format the output, we will introduce another library. And also we will talk about more mathematical function. So the first thing, let's talk about the seeing object. The seeing object, similar to the cout object, they both came from IOString. So when we include IOString library, actually not only we can use the cout to write the output to the console, we also can get the input from the console. The seeing object is the standard input object used to read input from keyboard. So here we only talk about the keyboard input. So in the future, we will talk about sometimes we also can get the input from reading a file. So this week, when we talk about the seeing, we only focus on the seeing is get the input from the keyboard. On the other hand, sometimes the user will see, they type the keyboard, they will see that's in the console, right? So that's why sometimes we just say the seeing actually we read from the console, but actually they are not really read from the console. It's the user type into the keyboard. So just like the cout, we will see out, then we will have the information insert to the cout. So then seeing actually kind of is opposite. The output, we want to output the information, we put in cout, they display in console. But in seeing actually is we read from the keyboard, then we will save that information into a variable. So that's why usually you will see seeing. After the seeing, we will have the greater operator. So the greater operator, then actually they are extract the information from keyboard, then we save and store in the variable. So sometimes you can have more greater operator. So one by one, they can store the input from seeing to one or more variable. So actually seeing example, we already see that from our chapter 1 example. Remember, we asked the user how many hours they work and what is their hourly rate. So after user enter the information, remember we use the seeing, then we insert the value into the rate or the hours variable. So the same thing in this chapter, actually I give you a lot of example as well. So don't forget, you always need to download those demo files from Canvas. Again, under the files, under the demo folder, yeah, remember here we go to module 3, so we have the chapter 3. So you can see actually I have a lot of example, even not enough to show in the screen. So please make sure, I would recommend you to download all of them first, so then you can have time to run one by one during our lecture recording. So we will see here, the first one, actually we just get the user input for the length and width for a rectangle. So then we calculate the area. So this one actually you already kind of had a similar example before, right? So you need to do the cout to output the information what you want to do for this program. So this program is calculate the area of rectangle. So then what is the length of the rectangle? Remember, we want to do the read from the user input and save to the variable. Before you're using the variable, we always need to define first. So here we have the length, width, and the area. So we got a user input for the length, we got a user input for the width. So after we calculate area equal to the length and the width, so then you see out the area for the rectangle. Then you see here, continue. You see your cout can have multiple less than operator. So the information you want to display, you just do one by one. So here is example. We have the area of the rectangle display and we have the new line. So that's the sample output. So you can run the program to see the example 1. But this one actually is, you already see a couple examples before. What I want to show you next is, like we say, your cout, you can have the insertion operator more than one. So the same thing actually for cin, we can do that too. So for example, if we ask the user, please enter the length and the width, then we say separate by the space. So then actually we can using one cin to read both length and width. So we see the next example. Next example actually is, I show the IDE from Cloud9. I want you to use the chapter 3 example 2. So this example we will do, actually we still do the same thing. We want to calculate the user input for a rectangle length, width, and area. But this time, let's try a little different. We will ask the user, say, this program calculate the area for rectangle. Please enter the length and the width of the rectangle, separated by a space. So we will see here, we just see the test run from here first. And you can see the output easier. So you will see here, actually the output we say the program calculate the area for rectangle. Please enter the length and width of the rectangle separate by the space. So if you are the user, when you see the separate by space, you will know you will have the length first. For example, 10.5. Then you enter a space, then you say the width is 20.8. So then you enter. You see they still give you the area of rectangle correctly. So this one is we show you sometimes if you want to get the user input in one time, then what you need to do is you will see the user actually enter the value one by one in the keyboard, okay, before you display anything. So that's why you see before you display anything yet, those things already enter in the keyboard. So that's why after you say separated by space, so I type here, that's the user. So then I do enter, right? So then you will see right away I need to process the input. So I know I already asked user to separate by a space. So that's why I know I have two value, 1 and 2. So if you already know you're expecting two value, right? So that's why you do the cin. So the first one, they will do the save in the length variable. Then the second one, they will save in the width. So then you see they will calculate the area correctly. So then we display the rectangle area. So this one is we show you, sometimes you're seeing if you have the multiple value you want to enter by the user, then they can do one by one, insert one by one. So that's here we say the cin object can be used to input more than one value. So the multiple value from the keyboard, be careful, you must separate it by space. The reason is that's why the cin, they know where they will stop. So sometimes you can say just a space. The space actually including the enter new line or the tab. The order is very important. The first value entered, it goes to the variable you want to save first. And also here, yeah, cin can read multiple variable. And also one more thing is, when you save the value into the variable, actually the user input should match the variable you define. For example, because earlier we defined height and the width is double. So no matter user enter int or double, yeah, the data type is match. But for example, if we make our length and width is int, so then you will see here, for example, we just try this one. Okay, we change to int, right? So then we run this program again. So we need to be careful. Now here, if you do 20.5 and 12.5, you will see here, actually you will see here, they even give you the value, actually it's 0. The reason is you doesn't have your data type match. The reason is you doesn't have your data type match. So that's why you ask for the value, but user, you define int, but user give you the double. Okay, so they even didn't don't care about the decimal number. They totally kind of cannot save the value correctly. But here, if you see you are integer, right? So, but you only give them the integer, then the value will be correct. So that's why one thing is, when you define the variable to store the data, you need to know how the user will enter. If you allow user only for the integer, you should let them know. Or you should specify here the length and width should be integer. Otherwise, you define int, user enter double, the value will be wrong. Or we just need to know, okay, so most of the time your length width will be double. So that's why we define variable is double. Okay, so that's all the numeric number. But how about user accidentally enter like different value? They accidentally type a word, then the value. Then you will see here, you see your result will become 0. Actually, that depends on how your IDE. Sometimes if your data type not match right, in C++, actually in C++, your program will fail. They even didn't give you the value. So I think Cloud9 actually they handle the user error handling. Also they do the user error handling. So that's why if the data type is wrong, they just put into the 0. But you can try this program on your IDE. So I believe as code, they will fail, program cannot finish. And also the Visual Studio will be the same. So that will be according to the different IDE. So that's why also in the program, we also show you in the PowerPoint file. So seeing convert data to the type that match the variable. So what happens if the input not match the variable type? Actually, most of the time before is on IDE will be runtime error. Your program will crash, not complete finish. But earlier we see from Cloud9, actually they will give you the default value for that variable become 0. But either way, your result won't be correct. So that's what we talk about the seeing object. Of course, you can try more on the demo file to see what happened for different situations. So that's our first video.